I never set out to be that guy. The one making mistakes, the one wrecking things that were supposed to last. But here I am. And if anyone ever bothered to ask how I got here, I would tell them it was not planned. Not in a million years. But people do not ask. Not really. They just look at the aftermath, pick up the broken pieces, and decide for themselves what kind of man you are. They make their own judgments, never caring about the steps that led to the fall. It all started with an email. Just one of those generic reunion invites that usually get buried under spam and ads for things nobody wants. I almost deleted it without a second thought. Almost. But then I saw her name on the list of confirmed guests. Emma Carter. The second I read it, I felt something shift inside me. Like a rope that had been holding me steady suddenly gave way, dropping me straight into the past. It had been years since I had even thought about Emma. At least, that is what I told myself. But the truth? She had always been there, tucked away in the corners of my mind. Back in high school, we had this thing. One of those complicated, almost but not quite relationships. We were close, too close for just friends, but we never fully crossed that line. Then one day, she moved away, and life, as it always does, just kept moving. I sat there staring at her name, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I should have closed my laptop. I should have ignored it. But I did not. I told myself I was not thinking about her. That my marriage to Rachel was solid. Maybe not exciting, but good. Reliable. We had a routine, a comfortable life. She liked plans and schedules, avoided surprises at all costs. And for a while, I had been okay with that. But somehow, I found myself at that reunion. The venue was fancier than I expected. One of those upscale hotels with soft lighting, expensive drinks, and a lobby that smelled like money. People from my past were everywhere, their faces familiar but older, softened by time and responsibility. I made small talk, shook hands, laughed in all the right places. Then Emma walked in. She had not changed much, still had that same effortless confidence, the kind that made her look like she belonged no matter where she was. She laughed, and it turned heads. It always had. And the moment her eyes locked onto mine, something inside me snapped into place. Well, she said, swirling her drink. I was wondering if you would show. We talked, caught up. The years between us melted away like they were never there. And the longer we talked, the lighter I felt, like I could breathe again. Like I was not just somebody's husband, tied down by bills and schedules. I was just me. One drink led to another, then another. And before I knew it, I was following her up to her room. Or maybe she was following me. The details blurred together, but the outcome was the same. I woke up the next morning in a bed that was not mine. And by the time I walked through my front door 2 days later, I had the perfect excuse lined up. A work trip, meetings that ran late, a packed schedule. I had practiced it on the drive back, made sure it sounded effortless, normal, natural. Rachel was in the kitchen when I got home, her back to me, stirring a cup of tea with slow, deliberate movements. Her other hand held her phone, her posture stiff. The air in the room felt thick. I cleared my throat. Hey, she did not turn around, did not rush over to greet me like she normally would. No questions about my trip, no warm welcome home. Just silence. Something was wrong. I set my bag down and took a step closer. Everything okay? Finally, she turned. Her face was unreadable, calm in a way that made my stomach twist. But her eyes, they told me everything. She knew. Did you have a good time? The way she said it made my pulse kick up a notch. No warmth, no curiosity, just something sharp, something cold. I forced a chuckle, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, it was fine. Meetings ran long, but it was productive. Rachel tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was some kind of puzzle she was figuring out. Then she took a slow sip of her tea, not breaking eye contact. I knew Rachel. She was not the type to ask a question she did not already know the answer to. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling like I'd stepped onto a frozen lake and heard the first crack beneath my feet. Rachel set her mug down on the counter with a quiet clink, crossed her arms. Then, in a voice too calm to be real, she murmured, "How was Chicago?" My stomach dropped. I had never told her where my fake trip was supposed to be. Chicago was a test, a trap. She had thrown the name out there like bait, watching for my reaction, and I almost fell for it. The word good was already forming in my mouth before my brain caught up, before I slammed on the brakes and forced my expression to stay neutral. I gave a small shrug, adjusting the strap on my bag, as if that was the reason my shoulders felt so tense. Along. You know how these conferences are. I waved a hand dismissively. Meetings, small talk, overpriced hotel food. The usual. Rachel nodded slowly. MMM. She did not blink. Did not break eye contact. I could feel it now. The weight of everything pressing down on me. The cracks widening beneath my feet. She knew, and I was running out of time. That sound. That tiny, insignificant sound. Worse than yelling. Worse than an outright accusation. It was quiet. Controlled. Like she already knew how this was going to play out. Then, without a word, she reached into her pocket and pulled something out. A small, crumpled slip of paper. A receipt. She pressed it flat against the counter with her palm, her fingers lingering over the top as my eyes locked onto the words printed there. The Lexington Grand Hotel. Not in Chicago. Not anywhere near the city where my imaginary work trip had supposedly been. No, it was the hotel. The one where I had spent the night with Emma. My stomach twisted into a knot. I found this in the laundry, Rachel said, her voice steady. Too steady. It was in the pocket of your jeans. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind at once, each scrambling for an escape route. Deny. Deflect. Make a joke. Lie. I forced out a dry laugh, shaking my head as if the whole thing was ridiculous. That's weird. I do not even remember being there. Rachel's expression did not change. Her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. Calculating. Really? I nodded. Try to sound casual. Yeah. I mean, maybe I stopped in for coffee before heading to the airport or something. She did not react. Did not even twitch. Coffee, she repeated flatly. Yeah. I shrugged like it was the most obvious explanation in the world. Or maybe I met a client there. You know how it is, sometimes they pick the place, not me. Silence. Thick and heavy, stretching between us like a rope tightening around my throat. That was when I felt it. The shift. This was not suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. Rachel was not a woman who raised her voice. She was not the type to throw things or scream or sob in the middle of the kitchen. No, she was something worse. She was calm, and I had seen her angry before, but this was something else entirely. A slow, simmering kind of fury, the kind that built quietly before it broke. And she was not looking for answers. She was not asking me to explain, because she did not need to. She already knew. Rachel reached for her mug, took a slow sip, then turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. And just like that, I knew I was screwed. She did not slam the door. She did not throw anything. She did not break down in tears. She just left. And somehow that was worse. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she had been, my mind running in circles. My heart was pounding, adrenaline buzzing through my veins, but I could not move, could not think. She knew, not suspected, not wondered. She knew, and I had no clue what the hell I was supposed to do next. For the next hour, the house felt suffocatingly quiet. I wandered from room to room, trying to act normal, but my ears were tuned to every little sound. I could hear Rachel upstairs, moving around the bedroom, but I had no idea what she was doing. Packing? Calling a lawyer? Planning how she was going to burn my life to the ground? I considered going up there, try to talk to her, but what was I even going to say? Hey, I know you caught me cheating, but let's just pretend it never happened. Yeah, no. So instead, I did what any man with a guilty conscience would do. I poured myself a drink. Nothing too strong, just enough to take the edge off, to slow my thoughts before they ran wild. I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard, swirling the glass in my hand. How the hell did she find out? The receipt? That was bad, sure, but not that bad. It could have meant anything. A work meeting, a flight mix-up, a mistake. But the way she looked at me, she had more. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Rachel came down the stairs, slow and deliberate, and I turned just as she stepped into the living room. She was holding something. Her phone. I swallowed hard. She did not say a word, just lifted it, tapping the screen. Then, without breaking eye contact, she pressed play. A voice filled the room. Not mine. Not hers. Emma's. You should have stayed the extra night. The blood drained from my face. I miss you already. I had no memory of this recording. No recollection of Emma saying those words. But there they were, playing out in real time, irrefutable and damning. Then my own voice, quiet but clear. You are trouble. Not much. Just 3 words. But enough. Rachel finally looked me dead in the eyes. Her face unreadable. You but dialed me. My mouth went dry. That sound. That single, meaningless sound. It was worse than a full accusation. I felt my stomach drop, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then she reached in her pocket, pulled something out. A folded slip of paper. A receipt. She smoothed it out on the counter, pressing her palm against it. I didn't need to read it to know what it was, but my eyes locked onto the logo anyway. The Regency Grand Hotel. Not Boston. Not anywhere near the business trip I had made up. The same damn hotel where I had spent the weekend with Claire. I found this in the laundry, Lena said, her voice flat, void of emotion. It was in your jeans pocket. I stared at it, my brain scrambling for a way out, trying to put together an excuse that would hold. Deny, deflect, minimize, lie. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head like she had just handed me something completely random. That's weird. I don't even remember being there. Her eyes narrowed. Really? Yeah. I forced a chuckle. I mean, maybe I stopped in for a coffee or something before heading to the airport. Lena didn't blink. Coffee? Yeah. I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral. Or maybe I met a client there. You know how it is, sometimes they pick the place, not me. She didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, watching me like she could see right through me. I felt it then, the shift. This wasn't suspicion. This was confirmation. Lena wasn't asking because she thought something was off. She wasn't piecing things together. She already had them figured out. Lena reached for her coffee, took a slow sip, then turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. And just like that, I knew. I was screwed. She didn't slam the door. She didn't throw things. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just left. And somehow that was worse. I stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been, my mind spinning. She knew. Not suspected. Not wondered. She knew. And I had no idea what the hell to do next. For the next hour, the house was silent. Too silent. I wandered from room to room, pretending I had things to do, but really I was just listening. She was upstairs in our bedroom, and I didn't know what she was doing. Packing? Calling a lawyer? Deciding the best way to destroy me? I thought about going up there, maybe trying to talk, to explain, but what the hell was I supposed to say? Hey, I know you caught me lying, but can we just forget about it? Yeah. No. Instead, I poured myself a drink. Not a strong one, just enough to take the edge off, to slow my thoughts before they spun out of control. I stood by the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard, swirling the glass in my hand. How the hell had she found out? The receipt? Yeah, that was careless, but a receipt wasn't enough. It could mean anything. A meeting, a last-minute hotel change. Hell, even a mistake. But the way she looked at me, she had more. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Lena came down the stairs, slow and deliberate, and when I turned, she was standing in the living room, holding something. Her phone. She did not say a word, just held it up, tapped the screen. Then, without even looking at me, she pressed play. A voice filled the room. Not mine. Not hers. Claire's. You should have stayed the extra night. My body went ice cold. I miss you already. I didn't remember Claire saying that. Didn't remember her leaving a message. But there was proof, undeniable, echoing through the room. Then I heard my own voice. Short. Amused. You're trouble. Not much. Barely anything. But enough. Lena finally looked at me. You but dialed me. My mouth went dry. I should have known. I should have realized that no matter how careful I had been, no matter how many details I'd covered, something would slip. 1 second. One mistake. That was all it took. Lena stared at me, her expression unreadable. I did not answer at first, she continued, her voice eerily calm. Thought maybe it was a mistake. But then I heard her voice. I had nothing. No words. No excuses. Lena let out a breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. I figured you would lie. She tossed the phone onto the coffee table, the screen still glowing. I did not reach for it. She was waiting for me to talk. to dig myself deeper. And I almost did. Almost. Instead, I just stood there, my brain running 1,000 miles a minute, trying to figure out if there was any way out of this. She let the silence stretch. Then, finally, she spoke. You were not in Boston. Her voice was steady, emotionless. You never even left town. She tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle she had already solved. You were in a hotel with your high school sweetheart while I was here, being your wife. She let the words sink in. Then she nodded, like she had just confirmed something to herself. Did I get all that right? I swallowed hard, opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because she was right, and we both knew it. I did what any man does when he is caught with nowhere to run. I denied everything. You're overreacting. Lena's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. Oh, that is rich. It's not what you think. Her eyes flashed. Really? Because it sounded exactly like what I think. I forced a sigh, rubbing the back of my neck. Look, you heard a couple of words and decided you know everything. That's not fair. She just stared at me. Then, slowly, she shook her head. You are pathetic. I should have stopped, but I was panicking. And panic makes you stupid. You're twisting this, I said, stepping forward. You. She held up a hand. I froze, not because I was scared, but because of the look in her eyes. Finality. I am done, she said. 2 words. And just like that, the floor beneath me cracked wide open. She turned, walked over to the side table, and picked up an envelope I had not noticed before. Then she tossed it onto the coffee table. I did not have to open it to know what it was. I could already feel it, the weight of it, the meaning, the end. This was never going to be a conversation, Lena said quietly. It is done. And then she did what I never expected. She smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a sad one. A freeing one. Then she walked away, leaving me standing there, alone with nothing but a phone, an envelope, and the realization that I had just lost everything. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't hurt. She was done. I clenched my jaw, my hands balling into fists at my sides. I wasn't used to feeling powerless. Not like this. Not standing in my own home, watching my wife pack up and leave without so much as a tear shed. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Lena, come on. We can talk about this. She gave me a long, measured look before shaking her head. No, we can't. Her voice was calm, steady. There was no room for negotiation. That was what finally hit me. This wasn't a fight. There was no battle to win. She had already left. I was just too slow to realize it. The air between us stretched, thick and suffocating, but Lena didn't seem affected. She just stood there, one hand on the counter, her fingers resting lightly against the cool surface, as if she was waiting for me to run out of things to say. I had plenty to say, but none of it mattered. I exhaled sharply, dragging a hand down my face. So that's it? You're walking away from 7 years just like that. Lena's lips pressed together briefly, like she was biting back a sigh. No, Jake, she said, her voice soft but firm. You walked away first. That stung, because she was right. She didn't wait for me to argue. She just turned, grabbed her bag from the counter, and walked toward the door. Panic hit me then. A deep, sinking kind of panic that I hadn't felt since I was a kid watching my father walk out on us. The kind that clawed at my chest, making it hard to breathe. I reached out, my fingers grazing her wrist. Lena. She stopped, didn't pull away, but she didn't turn around either. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. The ones that might change her mind. I screwed up, I admitted, my voice raw. I know that, but we can fix this. Lena stood still for a moment, long enough that hope tried to creep in. But then she exhaled slowly and finally turned to face me. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. There was no love there anymore. No hesitation, just exhaustion. She gently pulled her wrist from my grasp and gave me a small, almost pitying smile. No, Jake, she said, shaking her head. I can fix this. And with that, she walked out the door. I stood there, frozen, as the door clicked shut behind her. The silence was deafening. I could still smell her perfume in the air, still see the way her hair caught the light as she turned away from me. But she was gone. And this time, she wasn't coming back. The aftermath. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the door like I could will her back inside. Like if I just stood there long enough, she'd change her mind. But she didn't. Eventually, my legs carried me to the couch, and I sank down, feeling the weight of everything settle onto my shoulders. I had lost her. Not in the way people lose their car keys or forget where they put their phone. I had lost her in the way you lose something that never belonged to you in the first place. Lena had been slipping away for months, maybe years, and I hadn't even noticed. I had been too wrapped up in myself, too blind to see the distance growing between us. And then, when she finally let me go, I realized just how badly I wanted to hold on. But it was too late. I reached for the envelope on the coffee table, flipping through the divorce papers again. She had already signed them. She wasn't waiting for me to fight. She wasn't waiting for me to make promises I had no right to make. She was just waiting for me to accept it. I stared at the blank line where my signature was supposed to go. The pen was right there, sitting next to the papers like it had been left on purpose. Like she knew I'd sit here, staring at it, waiting for something to make this all feel real. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the line, and for the first time since she walked away, I let myself feel it. The regret, the shame, the crushing weight of knowing I had no one to blame but myself. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and then I signed. The ink bled onto the paper, sealing my fate in smooth, dark strokes. It was over, and now I had to figure out who the hell I was without her. Claire's voice was light, familiar, like we were just picking up where we left off, like I hadn't just signed my marriage away. I hesitated for half a second before I forced out, "You busy?" She let out a small laugh, low and knowing. "Depends. Why? You calling to catch up? Or is this one of those late-night regret calls?" I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my face. "I don't know. Maybe both." Silence stretched between us, not awkward but weighty. She knew. She always knew. "Lena found out," I said finally. Claire didn't react right away. No gasp, no fake sympathy. Just a slight pause, then I figured she would. That caught me off guard. "What?" She sighed, and for the first time, I heard something different in her voice, an edge, a quiet sort of resignation. "Come on. You really thought she wouldn't? You're not exactly subtle, you know." I stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, voice steady, "that you never really covered your tracks. You left breadcrumbs everywhere. The receipt, the phone call, hell, even the way you looked at me at the reunion. If Lena didn't figure it out then, it was only a matter of time." I gritted my teeth. "You think this is funny?" "No," she said, and this time, her voice was softer. "I think it was inevitable." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration bubbling up. "So what? You saw this coming and didn't think to warn me?" Claire let out a humorless chuckle. "I'm not your wife, Nathan. It wasn't my job to save your marriage." I flinched. She wasn't wrong. Still, the truth of it stung. "You know," she continued, and I could hear the ice in her voice now. "You calling me tonight? That tells me everything I need to know." I frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," she said, voice clipped, "that you were never going to pick me. Not really. If you had, you wouldn't have left that hotel alone. You would have called me before Lena, not after." I swallowed, my grip tightening on the phone. "That's not. It is," she cut in. "You need an escape, Nathan. That is all I ever was." I didn't answer, because she was right. And maybe that was the worst part of all of this. The truth wasn't some big mystery. I had wrecked my marriage for something I never actually wanted in the first place. Claire sighed, her tone losing some of its bite. "Look, I don't hate you. I don't even blame you. But I'm not going to be your backup plan." She let that hang in the air, waiting for me to argue, to say something that might change the course of this conversation. I didn't, because I had no argument. And for the second time that night, I realized I had lost everything. Claire inhaled, then exhaled, as if making a decision. "Take care of yourself, Nathan." Click. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen like it might give me a different outcome. But Claire was gone, just like Lena, just like everything else. And for the first time in my life, I had no one left to blame but myself. A soft chuckle drifted through the phone. "Didn't think I'd hear from you again." I hesitated for just a second, before forcing a smirk into my voice. That's supposed to be a complaint? More like a surprise, Claire said, playful but measured. Didn't peg you as the kind of guy who looked back. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, well, things change. She hummed, considering. Let me guess. You calling because you are bored or because you are lonely? I clenched my jaw, because she wasn't wrong. And somehow, hearing it laid out like that made the whole thing feel even more pathetic. I laughed, short, dry, hollow. You always this direct, only when it matters. I dragged a hand over my face, exhaustion pressing down on me like a weight I had been ignoring for too long. Lena left. Silence. Then softer, I figured she would. There was something about the way she said it. Not pity, not sympathy, just understanding. Like she had known before I did. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Claire's voice shifted, lower, smoother. I know a place near me. Quiet. We could grab a drink. The invitation hung between us, heavy and full of implications. And for a second, a long, dangerous second, I thought about saying yes. I thought about walking out the door, driving across town, and pretending that I was still the kind of man who could slip into something easy, something familiar. But then I looked around the house, and for the first time I really saw it. The pictures on the walls, the space where her things used to be, the imprint of a life that had already moved on. Claire wasn't the answer. She was just another escape. And I was done running. I exhaled, steadying myself. I don't think that is a good idea. She didn't sound offended. If anything, she sounded amused. You sure? No, but I was sure enough. Yeah. I hesitated, then added, Take care, Claire. And before she could say anything else, before she could pull me back under, I ended the call. And that was it. No dramatic pause. No second thoughts. Just the quiet, empty sound of my own breathing in a house that no longer felt like home. I set the phone down, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. Everything felt heavy. The weight of what I had done. The weight of what I had lost. The weight of knowing that, for the first time in my life, there was no one left to catch me when I fell. No wife upstairs. No warm voice on the other end of the phone telling me it was okay. Just me. Alone. And the worst part? I deserved it. I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff, my body aching in places I hadn't noticed before. Maybe that was what regret felt like. Not just in your chest, but in your bones. The living room was dim, the only light coming from the street lamp outside. I had no idea what time it was. Didn't really matter. Time didn't mean much when there was nothing waiting for you on the other side of it. I sat up slowly, rubbing my hands over my face. My phone was still on the table, dark and silent. No messages. No missed calls. Lena hadn't checked in. She wasn't wondering where I was. She wasn't regretting her decision. She was gone. And for the first time, I let myself sit with that truth. Not fight it. Not deny it. Just feel it. I pushed off the couch and wandered through the house, letting my fingers trail over furniture, over memories. The framed photos on the walls, most of them had both of us in them. Trips we took. Smiles that once felt real. Moments I had convinced myself would last forever. I stopped in the hallway, staring at one in particular. Our honeymoon. Lena was laughing, caught mid-moment, eyes bright, her face turned toward me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. I tried to remember what I had said to make her laugh like that. Tried to remember what it had felt like to be the man she looked at that way. I couldn't. Somewhere along the line, I had stopped being him. Somewhere along the line, I had forgotten what it meant to be someone worth loving. I made my way to the bedroom. The space felt colder than I remembered. Her side of the bed was empty, the sheets pulled tight, untouched. I sat down on the edge, staring at the nightstand where her jewelry box used to be. It hit me then. Not just the loneliness, not just the regret, but the loss. The kind that does not come from a single mistake, but from 1,000 small ones. From the nights I came home late without thinking twice. From the way I let distance settle between us until it was too wide to cross. The affair wasn't the first betrayal. It was just the last. And now there was no fixing it. No grand gesture. No last-minute confession that would make her come running back. Lena wasn't coming back. And for the first time, I understood what that really meant. I stood up, walked downstairs, and grabbed the divorce papers. They felt lighter than I expected. Maybe because the real weight was never in the paper. It was in what I had done to make her leave. I picked up the pen and signed. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but because holding on to something already lost was worse than letting it go. The next morning, I dropped the papers off at her lawyer's office. No dramatic moment, no last conversation, just a simple, quiet end to a life that wasn't mine anymore. As I walked back to my car, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the start of something else. Something unknown. Something I had no idea how to handle. For the first time in years, there was no routine, no predictability, no wife waiting for me at home. Just me, alone. And maybe for the first time, I had to figure out who the hell I really was. That night, I went to bed alone. No warm body next to me. No scent of her perfume on the pillow. No sound of her breathing in the dark. And for the first time, it finally sank in. I did not just cheat on my wife. I lost her. For good. And I had no one to blame but myself.